most of you know, for some time I lived in Iran. From 1967 until 1973, I lived in Iran during the Shah's reign. And I remember in 1971, one spring day, as I was glancing through the only local Armenian language newspaper, I saw an advertisement that caught my eye. They said that an exhibition of Armenian costumes and dresses from all centuries and all regions would be displayed at the Ararat Stadium in Tehran, Iran. I did not want to miss that opportunity. I purchased 2 tickets, my wife and I went, and we spent almost the entire day there. They had 174 costumes on display. This was the largest display of Armenian costumes that I had ever seen. And underneath each costume was an explanation saying the region or the city it represented and the century. They started, of course, with Iranian costumes. The first costumes on display were from Old Juga and Nor Juga, Old Julfa, New Julfa. New Julfa is near Isfahan today. And then they went to the region of Salmast. This again is within the boundaries of modern Iran. Then they went to Artsakh, the regions of Armenia, Van, Mush, Sasun, Kharpert, then Cilicia, Antap, Marash. And also there were dresses from cities beyond the borders of Armenia. They had dresses from cities where Armenian communities existed. Like there were costumes from Astrakhan. Astrakhan is in southern Russia today. It's where the Volga river pours into the Caspian Sea. So there were Armenians living in Astrakhan in the 18th century, and they had costumes from Astrakhan. They had costumes from Bulgaria, Serbia, Poland, where Armenians lived in the Middle Ages. It was very interesting. But what interested me was the last costume. The last costume not only interested me, but surprised me. Because the explanation, it said, the full ecclesiastical vestments of an ordained Armenian woman deacon from Tiflis, Georgia. It was interesting. I was shocked because I had not known that there were ordained women deacons in the Armenian church. So I started researching this topic. I love to do research. I remember in college, one of the first classes I took was Principles of Research. They taught us how to conduct research. And I love to do research because I always find new things, and I love to dig up new information. So I started researching this. I wanted to know when this practice started and when did it end. I discovered a manuscript which is at the Madena Taran in Yerevan. It's called manuscript number 39. For the sake to facilitate reference, each manuscript is given a number. This manuscript, manuscript number 39, is from the 5th century. And there it says, women deacons were ordained by bishop, like male deacons. The rite of ordination, rite R-I-T-E, the rite of ordination for women deacons was the same as male deacons. They wore stoles. You know what the stole is? They put it over the shoulder, left shoulder. It's like a ribbon that goes all the way down to the ankle, covers the front and the back. Some are plain, just have a cross, several crosses on them. Others are very ornate. I've seen the plain ones and the ornate ones. So women deacons wore stalls like the male deacons. They were allowed to read the gospel during the Badarak. They were allowed to transfer the chalice from the secondary altar to the main altar and hand it to the officiating priest. They served at the altar. They carried the kushots. You know what the kushot is. They served as teachers. They ran orphanages. They cared for the poor and the sick, and baptized grown-up women. Well, we know that the Armenians accepted Christianity through 180 as their state religion. The Armenian nobility and influential people got baptized by St. Gregory, but there were still pagan Armenians in Armenia. Up to the 7th, 8th centuries, there were pagan Armenians in Armenia. And that's why during the Badarak, there's a time where the deacon says, Mivok Yerachayitz, Mivok Ammakritz, Mertesi Asvatzayin Choruten. At that time, when the deacon chanted this, everyone who was not baptized was asked to leave. They could not attend the Pun Badarak, the main part of the Badarak. They could attend the first part, but not the last part. Mivok Ammakritz, none of the defiled can approach the divine mystery. So there were pagan Armenians who gradually were inducted into the church. The Armenians, after their conversion, began a missionary work. Armenian missionaries were sent to Georgia. The Armenians converted the Georgians to Christianity. The Armenians were sent to Armenian missionaries went to Albania to convert the Albanians. And of course, Armenian missionaries were active within Armenia, baptizing the remaining pagans. And so the women deacons baptized the grown-up women. And we know this because several years ago, my brother, Dr. Kevork Terian, who specializes in Armenian studies, published a book called A Letter from Patriarch Makarios to the Armenian Catholicos Vertanes. Vertanes was the son of Gregory, of Saint Gregory, and Makarios was the Greek Patriarch of Jerusalem. My brother discovered this letter and he translated it from Greek into Armenian, into English, and wrote a commentary about it. This letter was written on the occasion of the building of the Holy Sepulchre Church in Jerusalem, when King Constantine converted to Christianity in 313 AD. His mother, Helena, came to the Holy Land, and her main mission was to identify the place of Jesus' crucifixion and burial. She finally found the location and wanted to build a church. She built the Church of the Holy Sepulchre that encompasses Calvary and the burial site of Christ. Today this church is divided among 5 Christian denominations. The Greeks have one section, the Roman Catholics have another section, the Armenians have a considerable part, and the Copts and the Assyrians have smaller sections. Now, when the Holy Sepulchre Church was built, the Catholicos of Armenia, this was in the 5th century, Vertanes, who was the son of St. Gregory, sent a delegation to Jerusalem to attend the festivities. And the Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem, his name was Makarios, sent a letter with them to Catholicos Vertanes. And in this letter, he complains about certain practices of the Armenian Church and advises the Catholicos to take immediate action to correct those, what he termed, abuses. One, he said, deacons should not baptize converts. priests should only baptize converts. The deacons could assist. In the Armenian church, between the 4th and 5th centuries, deacons and priests were allowed to baptize converts. And that's why women deacons were baptizing grown-up women. And Catholicos Bertanes wrote an answer to the Greek Patriarch of Jerusalem. He told him about the evangelist Philip, not the Apostle Philip. There are two Philips mentioned in the New Testament. One was one of the 12 apostles. The other one was Philip the deacon. He's mentioned in Acts chapter 6. Okay, Philip the deacon, after Jesus' resurrection, was preaching the gospel in Samaria to the Samaritans, and he had great success. Then he was told by the Holy Spirit to go to Gaza, to the desert of Gaza, to meet an Ethiopian who was riding in a carriage and was reading the book of Isaiah, but he wasn't understanding what he was reading. And Philip joined him, explained to him those prophecies in the book in Isaiah pertained to the suffering of Jesus Christ, that he was bruised for our iniquities. He was punished for our sins. And the Ethiopian came to faith and turned to Philip and said, "Can anything forbid me from being baptized?" When they came to an oasis, they stopped the carriage, and Philip, who was a deacon, baptized the Ethiopian, who happened to be the treasurer of the Queen of Ethiopia. So he was an influential man. And when he went to Ethiopia, he evangelized his countrymen. That's why Ethiopia was the first African country to become Christian. So our Catholicos Bertanes answered the Greek pair saying, in the New Testament, we have an incident where a deacon baptized a convert. And he said that the Armenian practice was legitimate because it was biblical. So, okay. Now, there was a Russian priest called Nicholas Zernov who studied in England. He earned a PhD at the University of Oxford. And his aim was to bridge the gap between the Greek Orthodox Church and the Anglican Church. He was the founder of the Anglican Orthodox Ecumenical Fellowship. Of course, he was not successful in achieving his aim. He died in 1980 without fulfilling his mission. But he says that in 1939, he visited Tiflis, Georgia, and on a Sunday, he attended Mass at the Armenian St. Stephen's Church in Tiflis, and he was impressed when a fully vested Armenian woman deacon, brought the chalice to the altar and handed it to the officiating priest. That was in 1939. So, in 1939, there were women deacons officiating at the Padarach at St. Stephen's Church in Tiflis, Georgia. In 1944, the only Armenian seminary in the United States, St. Nerses Seminary in New Rochelle, New York, published a book. It was a small book entitled A Brief Survey of Armenian Deaconesses. And it was a very brief survey, maybe 20-25 pages, written by Archpriest Apel Oglukian. And he says the practice of ordaining women deacons in the Armenian church started as early as the 5th century. And what he said is right, because it harmonizes with what I discovered in manuscript number 39, which is at the Manelantaran, which is from the 5th century. At New Rochelle, there is a non-Armenian professor of Armenian studies. Her name is Dr. Roberta Irvine, And she researched this subject and found the names of 23 Armenian women deacons who had lived and served between the 17th and 19th century. And she has a list of their names. Now in manuscript 39, which is at the modern Yerevan, mention is made of one of the deacons. Her name is Ustiane, and the manuscript calls her Ustiane Sargavak. It's interesting that these women deacons were never called Sargavakuhi, never. They're called Ripsime Sargavak, Ustiane Sargavak, Anna Sargavak. Why? Because they wanted to show that the women deacons were on an equal footing with the male deacons. They were called Sargavak, not Sargavakuhi. And this Ustiane Sargavak was a scribe. We are told that she copied Yerishe's The Battle of Avarai. Yerishe was a historian. He wrote a book entitled The Battle of Avarai, and Ustiane Sargavak copied that book. She was a scribe. In Istanbul, in 1866, the Kalfayan Sisterhood of Armenian Deacons was established. And the last ordination of a woman deacon in Istanbul was in 1982, when Ripsime Sasunyan was ordained as a deacon by Patriarch Kevork Terian in 1982. And we're told that this deacon excelled in comforting the bereaved. Her only duty, her main duty, was to visit the families of the bereaved and comfort them. And Patriarch Kevork Terian says she was gifted in comforting the bereaved, and she was better at this job than any priest. Well, I'm sure most of you visited the Tcharentz Cathedral, but probably you did not notice the inscription on the wooden door of the main entrance of the cathedral. The doors of the main entrance have an inscription, and the inscription says, "In memory of Deacon Ripsime Terian," and then the date is 1889. 1889. Deacon Ripsime Terian served in Tiflis, Georgia. She also made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, and the Armenian Patriarchate of Jerusalem has a special organ called Sion. Their monthly newspaper is called Sion because the Jerusalem Patriarchate is established on Mount Sion, Mount Zion. So her visit was recorded in the Sion newspaper of the Armenian Patriarchate of Jerusalem, and there it says that she was allowed to serve at the altar of St. James Cathedral. The order of Armenian women deacons consisted of 3 levels. First, there was the subdeacon level. Subdeacon, Armenian we say Gisa Sargavak. I can guess Sargavak. Gisa Sargavak, then deacon, and then archdeacon. These were the 3 levels. When a woman decided to become a deacon, she was allowed to join a certain convent and was given the rank of subdeacon. Subdeacons had to study 3 years. They had to study the Bible, theology, hymnology, ritual, Armenian rituals, and after 3 years they were ordained as deacons. And after serving successfully as a deacon for 15 years, they were given the rank of archdeacon and never went beyond that. That was the highest rank which ordained women attained. In the 7th century, there's an Armenian deacon called